Well, what do we know about the methods? We know that some of the script was completed, some of it was filmed, and then there was a question of money, and then Anderson goes off and makes make a fair amount of TV commercials, and you can find these on YouTube, and they're very, very droll. And if you respond at all to the humor in this, he's basically doing the same, much of the same visual strategy in those fixed camera, very clever blackout gags, and it's there's an insurance company campaign that he does. I think the tagline was "Sooner or later, we all need insurance." So it's a series of unfortunate events, much like in this film. But the film took 3 years to complete because of this stop and start, and but he began the previous picture, his third of 4 features to date, Songs from the Second Floor, with just a bit of the script done, and then I think he took it to Berlin and shopped it, and then raised more money. And
also coming out of pocket for it because he couldn't find the money. Because my understanding was it's impossible to explain this movie, obviously, to financiers. So he would show bits, but still ended up, like, I know for Songs on the Second Floor, financing a lot of it himself. And it's funny because you finally think that, wow, about the casting, you got to find actors who are so confident that they would just stand in one place and not move. You just think about when that guy comes walking, when he walks out of the barbershop, and then when he walks to the restaurant, you're kind of shocked because nobody else has done that much movement. I mean, nobody else has walked that much. So, I mean, there's all that calculation in it. And I just find myself thinking, of these comparisons, it's like being trapped in the world's ugliest IKEA. Because you go into one of those stores and there are these sort of fake living rooms and dining rooms and restaurants, and it's all like that.
in fact, the exact color of that gravy in one of those last vignettes is the color of the gravy of the meatballs at an IKEA. So that's a detail that you can take or leave, but yeah, that I think it was 5 million euros all told, which is certainly modest. But I think in terms of number of takes, he's traditionally kind of pardon me, up there with David Fincher in terms of 40, 50 takes. Yeah, and I mean maybe as few as 10, but even doing that dinnerware sequence 10 times, I love it. I mean, the fact that they found the one that leaves the 2 glasses just sort of aimlessly spinning on what used to be a pretty nice looking tape. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but you get that sense too that doing that many takes, you wear the actors down a little bit, so they can't. They're basically sort of too beaten down. To act, yes. Yes. It's that because I remember that famous story that Scatman Crothers tells about being in The Shining, where he had to walk down a hallway 66 times, and he was like a 70-year-old man. He just goes to Kubrick at the 30th take, and he goes, "Am I doing something wrong?" He goes, "Oh no, it's fine. Just do it again." And you get the feeling here what somebody like that wants is not acting, but behavior.
So the poor guy who's lost his a lot of his retirement money, they had to do that shot over and over too.
It became real after a while.
But also, I mean, just in terms of the narrative, it's really open-ended, and all those little vignettes, and you say, like, you never know when they're going to end, and sometimes they go longer than you expect, and other times shorter. But I don't know if anybody else noticed, but it seemed like the last 2 vignettes now before the bombers or whatever the planes are coming at the end seem to finally have sort of, I mean, the gravy doesn't look very good, but it seemed to have sort of happier families, like there was a couple actually cooking together, and they had guests there, and then there's the guy teaching his little kid to ride the bicycle while mom looks on. So the last people we see before the planes come also seemed really ominous rather than something super silly. So it's almost like, oh, there is something worth saving, and if there's no future, it's really sad now. So it seemed to me, at least on this, the end does also kind of go back to be a little more serious too, in terms of at least calling attention to world violence and things you can't control.
But that sense of kind of fear, that sense of fear that there is in Tales from the Second Floor, that sense of dread that exists there. There's this constant sort of slightly looking up as we're waiting for the worst to happen. That thing that Beckett talks about in that Proust essay. You might as well wait for the worst to happen because it's going to happen.
It really seems to me, I didn't know this director or this movie before coming here, and I really admire him because he shows no fear of being ridiculed, because maybe this movie, nobody will get it. Uh, some of the vignettes I really saw, I couldn't find the joke, and some I could. But it seems this guy had no fear, he didn't care, and he just made the movie for himself, and some people laughed.
Well, and it's, what's fascinating to me is it's an obsessive style because of the tight control, but he has just enough of a visionary within that slightly tilted box that you just find you're in that world every time, and yet you get just a strange variety of laughs.
That's so odd about it too is at a certain point you feel like you've dreamt some of these scenes. Like the sequence where the dog is being pulled very slowly behind the master. I mean, it goes to the point where it goes to cruelty, then it goes past cruelty where it's just funny again because it's so absurd. I mean, just remember the casting session for that dog and finding the ears are just the right length to drag behind the dog as he's being pulled. It's really just kind of wonderful that sense of all these details being worked out. I mean, nothing being left to chance at all.
No, so I think Anderson is one of the great art filmmakers who's left these days. So who does, again, he does have his own rigorous style. It's like Tati, it took years to make the next film, and so yeah, he's not cranking them out like other people.
I'm sorry, did you find kind of a Buñuelian sense to some of it?
Oh yeah, I mean, the absurdity is.
Because that to me, it felt more to me Buñuel than Tati.
Maybe egocentric. All of the characters were only caring about themselves. And the people in the background, they were just watching. And somebody appears, as you said, in the background, and suddenly something funny happens. That's about it.
And that makes the psychiatrist so important.
Oh, yes.
They're all whining and mean and,
I think that's the other kind of great stylistic change-up that you don't really notice so much, that there's just enough direct address, I guess, right to the camera, and it's all very casual. You know, I love the way that is set up just in this. The one thing that really truly is like playtime to me is that tiny little traffic jam, basically a three-car traffic jam. And then it's just, I had the strangest dream last night. And then you go into probably one of the best crafted series of gags, painfully funny, and so much of
the death penalty. You mean the scene with?
Yeah, and I just love how much guilt is involved with that dream, and
Yeah, the weeping lawyer.
The world's worst lawyer weeping.
Yeah. Well, they're
and the beer, and they get beer in the courtroom.
That electric chair could be in an IKEA, just the way it was sitting there. I mean, it really is. That there's an incredible sort of presentational aspect to all of it too.
But there are also a lot of reversals. So yeah, instead of the crying defendant, who he's the one saying that's life, and instead but much like the woman, is it Mia, the woman who's mean to her boyfriend with the dog. She's the one who's going to go in the bar, and he's the one with the dog, and I've got a veal roast in the oven. So even though he doesn't look the type, there's so many different reversals, and I think that also makes the lawyer really.
Well, and I love the passive aggression where it's like invective, despair. I might come over later. I think it's time for questions.